Hey everybody, Jonathan Leiter here, coming at you with another tutorial video on green screen and chroma keying effects. Primarily today we're going to be dealing with advanced techniques of removing green screen and green casts from your footage. A lot more painstaking processes today, because as you may notice, when going through your own green screen footage, not everything is going to be perfect. It's not going to be easy every single time. You're going to run into problems that you will have to tackle on an individual and very monotonous basis. So I'm going to be showing you some of that stuff today. By the way, if I didn't mention it before, these videos are also serving as behind-the-scenes featurettes for my new short film, Bill and Maggie's Intergalactic Taxi Service, and all of which the footage that we will be looking at is from that film. So if you're wondering what all this footage is from, that's what it's from. So, if you recall, we were originally looking at this shot here, scene 3, shot DA, take 1. I forget exactly why we put an A there. I think this was just an additional shot we had to get that we had to squeeze in somewhere on the shot list. But if you'll notice here, what we went through is just the whole process of taking this one shot from this original unaltered footage with the selective color added to bump up the green. We took it in here, minus these, and we did a combined layer change with the layer mode change to color. We put a key light on here to isolate the green again, and a channel combiner to reduce all the green to gray. We created a black and white matte utilizing a pre-painted mask for all of the detailed parts of this console here, and then we composited everything together with a curves adjustment as well as a background, and then I purposefully added these solids that I've blurred to create this cast effect for an orange side and a blue side, as well as these little cheap grids on the screens here. So that was the simple, straightforward process, as straightforward as it can get. There are sometimes, very few rare times, where you will get perfect removal, perfect black and white masks. You don't have to do anything and you're good to go. But today we're going to be dealing with some of the more difficult stuff. Also, we're going to be dealing with reinstating or replacing color, and some of the techniques that can be involved with getting that done. I won't be able to show you how a finished version of what that looks like will be, but I'll show you some of the simple solutions, and then I'll briefly get into one of the more difficult solutions about it as well. So let's dive right into this. Okay, so let's take out this shot, and we'll go in here to 9C1. Now, one of the things I do want to talk about here initially is replacing color, because that's one of the simple things to talk about. And I'll just explain a little bit about it here. I'll kind of introduce it. So, if you notice, let's take a look at the original. That's actually, original here. So in this original, one of the first things you might not notice about it is that it's very flat. Most people these days with modern digital DSLR cameras will shoot everything at a flat pass, meaning that the contrast is very low, the saturation is very low, and all of the values are just kind of mid-range. That way all of your blacks are kept as good as possible, all the information there, all the information in the lights, and all the information in the midtones, as well as all the colors are kept. That way, when you take it into post, you can affect it any which way you want. Now, in the original days of film, and even today in modern film, I think there's still an attempt to get the look you want beforehand and then deal with it afterwards, whatever's left. But in the modern day of let's fix as much as we can in post so that we have full control over our artistic choices and the ability to change something if we really want to, that's why people shoot it at a flat pass. And many DSLR cameras like the Canons, the GH4, the Sony A7S, I'm sure, all have these sort of built-in color profiles to get you the best flat pass possible. Even the Blackmagic Pocket and Blackmagic Cinema all have that sort of stuff, I believe so. Now, as you look at this green color is perfect. There's barely any variation in it. It's really well lit. It is causing some strong casts in some areas, but other than that, it's beautifully flat. So this is going to get us a good result, except there were, I believe, some areas of issue here. For as you look at here, these are masks which I have purposefully animated to follow problem areas that resulted in some black spotting. So if we take that off and turn this back on, you'll notice there, oh, actually no, that's supposed to be there. There's a black spot. There's a couple of other spots down there. They're very minuscule, actually. So let's try to just scrub through this a little bit. This spot is meant to be there. If you'll notice, it's an opening between his arm, and then this sliver right here between their heads, as well as here. Those are supposed to be there. But if you scrub through here, you'll notice these tiny little slivers, as well as up here on his ear, that pop up once in a while. And what that is actually the buttons on his uniform. In fact, if you look right here, these three little nibs, this splotch and this splotch, that's from his button, that's from his button, and then these little bits are from Bill's buttons. And because they're all reflective, they're reflecting the green around them, which results in these slightly gray, slightly black spots, and all of those have to be covered up with animated masks around here, over here, up here, and all over the place. Many times this can actually be far worse than just little spots. So this is actually an easy example of this popping up in your footage. But it can get far worse than this. There's even a little sliver up here on his hat that I have yet to remove, as well as on one of these guards' helmets. Now, something else that you may notice about this footage, let's take a look. Take a look right here on his jacket, and then back here on the original green. See the difference? There's a difference in saturation on his outfit. Now, number one, there's a saturation difference on the blue and a saturation difference on the yellow. But consider this for a moment. That yellow is actually not the yellow that we got when we removed the green, because what happens when you remove the green is that you not only remove the color green from the background, but you remove that color from everything else in the image. So what ends up happening is you take the green channel out of almost everything. It takes it out of Lord Sheldon's tie and sash here. It takes it out of the blue color a little bit. It takes it out of all these characters' faces and the hat, but it primarily takes the yellow tinge out of all of these stripes and stitching and embroidery all over this uniform, which ends up giving you a very peachy orange color. And that's not at all what we want. We want to retain that yellow color. So once this mask has been created, and once we've removed the green with a gray, now you have a solid basis with which to add what's called a hue and saturation effect. Now what I've done is normally these will show up with the channel control as master. This changes the saturation on everything. But if we just change this to the reds, the red in their outfits down here will get bumped up enormously once you take it up around 60. And if we changed it to the greens, well, effectively there really wouldn't be anything, because there's not a bit of green in this image, which is kind of funny. There's no green whatsoever. But the blue channel is quite prominent here, and actually this is what it originally showed up as. Very gray, very flat. So all we did is I changed it to the blue channel, although there is a cyan. If there's a cyan, that involves this really bright blue, and that's only if bright blue was available. But with the blues, it's primarily this region with a little cast off in the purples and the cyans. So that affects all of this color. And if you bump it up around 60, you get a nice solid color. However, if you tried to bring it up any higher than that, you affect everything in the image. You know, you affect it anyway, but you really start seeing everything get bumped up until their faces start turning purple and everything just gets all screwed up. So you have to be very careful not to go much higher above 60 for an effect like this to reinstate a color that you want. But the other nice thing is that luckily with all of these embroidery patches and such, when they turn up as orange, we can add an effect on top of them, changing it to the yellow channel and bumping that just enough up to 20. And oh, well, actually, let me back up. If we change this, if we remove this actually, put a hue and saturation in here. First of all, what happens is if you change this to the yellows, that will affect this region as well as this region. If you change it to reds, it would get this. If you change it to yellows, it is grabbing the orange here, which is where this falls into. This is roughly on the yellow spectrum. So if we take that and we take this slider, which will actually shift everything in this orange channel over into the yellow. So we take this wheel here, slide it, about around 40. Now your yellow's back, and just for a little bit of a boost, we can bump that up. I would say maybe 36 is good, but you don't want it to be too strong, so probably more around 25. And that just gives it a strong color contrast there to add on to the blue. They're not equal by any means. They could be more so where the blue is even stronger than that, but unfortunately we can't bump it up any higher than that, otherwise it'll start affecting everything. But I will get into a little bit later what you can do to try and make this blue even stronger, but it involves a little bit more difficult detail on your part. Now, when working with green screen footage, if I also did not mention this before, one of the big things you're always or almost always going to have to do is do a garbage mask. And one of the questions I think I got asked quite a bit while on set shooting this film, a couple of different people actually were concerned about this, but if you look at this image here, all of these extra bits on the outside of the frame, these cords up here and wires, these curtains, these cords down here, our boom operator Martin, and this door and these extra bits of stands and green screen props, you might start to wonder, is all this okay? Should all this be in here? Should we try to get this even further out of frame? No, you don't have to. All of this does not matter. See, when you look at this, there's sort of this border around all the characters because all 5 of them, including this ramp right here, they're all on the green. They do not go outside of the green. They do not overlap this step here. They don't overlap these curtains. They are perfectly fine. The only issue really is their harsh shadows down here, and I did have to end up dealing with those individually later on in a separate shot very similar to this. But all this extra stuff doesn't matter because when we go to create the matte, if we turn this off and put something like a gray solid in the background just so you can see what's going on, we mask out everything. This entire scene used to look like this. See? So they're on the green. All of this stuff on the outside doesn't matter. The boom mic doesn't matter. The boom operator doesn't matter. He can be right up next to him. The cords don't matter. The curtains don't matter. It's fine. It's perfectly fine. It looks great. So all you got to do is mask it out. And if the characters do overlap over that stuff, then you either get into animated masks or rotoscoping. And it's all perfectly easy to do. as long as you have the patience for it. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. If you're isolated to a very small sliver of room, like if we had half this much green screen space and we still piled everybody into that space, as long as they don't go outside a flat enough green area where the green stays consistent, they're perfectly fine. Nothing will happen. All of this stuff will be gone. So that's why we can take something that looks like this and turn it into this and put whatever we want behind them. It all absolutely works. But one of the things you will notice is if we take a look at the mat here with some of the stuff turned off, this is what you start out with. So if we look way down here, the ramp looks terrible. And the reason for that is when we look at the bright and green here, there's a green reflection, a very strong one on the side of this. And when we go in here, it's all kind of chewed away because the green was removed. There's also a dark green shadow underneath this, which is also having a hard time getting removed, even though this one was also much better removed. It creates kind of a hazy border. And so then what I have to do is I have to come back in here and figure out a way to fix all of these missing bits and pieces here, because see, the entire upper pipe of this railing is gone because it's all chewed away from the reflections of green on it. So what I did for numerous shots is I went in and I pre-painted this mask to reinstate all those details. I created a carefully detailed outline and border and filled it all in with all the details intact. But the other thing you notice is that this green haze or gray haze is still here. So what I have to do there is put a black mask on top of it. But then you also notice that we lose his legs. So then I have to put a white mask on top of that and animate it to where his feet go. Now this wasn't perfect, but if you notice when he steps down, let me see, it starts up here. So he steps down and it creates this. I could still come in here and remove the rest of this with black, which I just might. But I had to follow his legs perfectly so that just the outside edge of that black box was fixed and his legs were reinstated, and then just kind of follow him around as he rocks back and forth. And I also had to catch his hat because I didn't realize his hat went so far down, but I had to follow that out as well. And then once it was away from the black, it was perfectly fine again, so on and so forth. So if we come back here, that's what all this stuff is all of these animated masks. Now, this is another example of something that's pretty good. You still get a lot of hazing with all these harsh shadows down here and dark green splotches, so that all can be fixed. I have fixed that in a much worse looking shot than this. But what can also happen is that if you are on a low budget project like I was making this film, you might end up with a very strange issue where your green screens were not turned on. They just were not turned on. So take a look at this. If you look closely at this, this doorway is supposed to have a green screen in it. In fact, it does, but we forgot to turn the light on for it. Now initially I thought it really wouldn't matter because it's meant to be dark back there anyway, but funny enough, I think it still needs something there. So what we end up with is a very big problem. How do we fix this? How do we remove this so we can put something else back there? Well, one of the big things that you may notice when working with footage and actors on green screens is that they have hair. And hair is highly detailed. Look at all these little bits and strands and frayed edges here. All of that stuff has to be intact, because if it isn't intact, it won't look right. You can't draw a mask around this. It's too difficult. It's too complicated. You could paint an animated mask, but that would require taking the entire sequence of images, every frame, putting them into Photoshop and hand painting them. I could do that, but that's even more difficult than rotoscoping it. I could rotoscope it, but rotoscoping can be a little funky because it's very pixelated and it's not perfectly refined to very small pixel edges and pixel thicknesses. So it's only meant for semi-detailed images that don't have a lot of very minute details like that. So what is the only other thing we can do? Because there really is only one other option. If you look at the entire image here, most of it is in the mid-tones. It's very gray, very middle of the road. But back here, it's very dark, very black, very stark. Same as over here, but this really doesn't matter. Again, what we're focused on is just that doorway back there. The parts of their outfits that are solid, we can cover those up with masks where necessary, but their hair is what I'm most concerned about, both her hair and her hair. So what do? Well, what I figured out is that just like with creating the black and white masks with the green screen and key light, we can actually come in here, put a levels adjustment on this, and try to get that black or dark area back there solid black, and as much of the rest of this as we can solid white. So let's give that a try. Bump this down until it doesn't get any darker, about there, and then slide this all the way to the left. There. Now you'll notice that this is all messy colors. Obviously what we have to do is put a tint on this, and that makes it black and white. So what do we have now? We have black here, black where we wanted it, black in these windows, but we'll actually have to fix those a little bit differently. And then we still have gray tones in here. What do we do for that? Well, you just put another level on there to fix what's left. So the black is already as black as it can get. Pump these levels all the way to the left. Oh, not too much. There we go. Maybe need to bump that black up even more. So there we go. As much white as we can get and as much black as we can get. Now, I already did this, so I don't need to do it here. So let's go into the doorway mat. Now look at that. Look at that hair. Every strand of hair is intact. Beautiful. Exactly what we want. But let me show you what it takes to make this, because this is far more complicated than you think. Okay, so let's check it out. Actually, let's scrub through this a bit. Okay, let's check it out maybe right here. Let's check it out what it looks like right there. So, if I turn this off, turn these off, turn those off, turn that off. So here it is originally, unaltered. All the blacks are black, all the whites are white. That doorway is exactly what we want, but look at all these black splotches everywhere. It's a mess. So what do? Well, first of all, you got to isolate the space that you want to keep, because everything else is supposed to be white. These windows over here do turn out black, but they're very speckly and hazy and a lot of noise. So the better thing to do for those is to actually just put a black mask around them, feather it, and leave those be. They'll stay exactly where they are. The camera does not move in this case, so those are perfect. This is what we're worried about, though. So here's our doorway. Here's everything we want to keep. But we have all these edges that we don't want to keep. So what do? We mask them off. So here's one set of masks. Here's another set of masks. Here's a third set of masks for certain areas that are still outside that will come in later. Then, if you notice, we come up to right here. Right down here, there's a shadow, or actually in this case this is probably a green highlight that appears on the green screen that's all darkened in the background. And if we look at the original footage here, scroll to about that same point. Yeah, see, it gets green right here because her shadow was covering it up before, but now it isn't. So right here we have a problem. We need to put more black masks in there as well. So now we put them there. And so if you look at this without the original footage and without this mask here, and we put a gray solid in there now, you'll realize just how much detail went into covering up all the black areas that I didn't want. It took multiple masks, at least a dozen, just to fix all those issues. But once it is all done, it is a pretty solid result. There you go. The doorway is black. There's still a bit of green haze on her hair, which I still need to fix. You will notice that there is still green in this image because there was no green to begin with, so I did not remove it. And I don't intend to. But the windows are black, the doorway is black, the hair in her hair is retained, all the little details there, perfect as could be, and everything we want to keep is kept. Anything else that I perhaps missed, most people I don't think will notice, but there is some green back here which we will need to fix in that very sliver corner back there, so I'll have to figure out something to do for that. But beyond that, this really I don't think could be better than this. It's not much, it could not be much better than this in its current condition. And it's a much better result than even I could have expected. And now we'll bring in something that's unfinished, and we'll see if we have any issues with that. So let's go in here to 28, no, not quite that one. So let's go in here to 29B2. Okay, this might prove some issues. Now as you can see, there is a lot of strong green in here, but there's also a very greenish cast on everybody in this image. So if you recall, first thing we got to do is move all attributes to a new composition with this, put this inside a new pre-composition. By the way, one of the things you may notice is if you're working in Premiere and you take a clip that is cropped down from an original piece of footage, like let's say this is your original footage, you want to crop it at this 1 second mark and this 2 second mark here, or actually this 2 second mark. You want to crop it down to these 2 bars here, so it's just this portion. If you take that portion, you put it into a Premiere project in the timeline, and then you click on it and replace it with an After Effects composition, it will bring it into After Effects just with this portion. Now watch what happens when I do this. If we pre-compose this as it is, leave all attributes, and act like we're doing things normally, you bring it in there, this remains the same, but then this brings in the entire footage. See this? It's 55 seconds long. The original is only 4. So it's taken all of these attributes, including the length of this clip, and left it out here. Whereas inside here, it's taken the entire clip and reverted it back to its original length. Now, trust me when I say that this can cause some problems. So please remember, if you do this, make sure that the very first pre-composition you make with this footage taken from Premiere replaced with After Effects composition, when you do your first pre-composition, move all attributes. Don't add any effects to anything. Just pre-compose it as it is so that this length is retained. Very, very important. It's caused me quite a bit of distress in previous shots, let me tell you. So, going in here, this is the very bottom of your pre-composition tree. This remains the same. So, come back out here. I've actually done this 80 times, perhaps even more than that, so I'm pretty good at this. Create matte, move all attributes again. Then we take bright and green down from here. So we take this, we bring it back out here, we move the create matte under it, turn that off because we won't want it showing up behind everything else. Take the bright and green again, pre-compose it as fix green spill. Okay, come in here, duplicate this, turn this one to color, take the key light, add it onto the top one, go in here to create matte, make sure that's there too, put the key light on that because we'll need it in both. Come in here, might as well do this now, channel combiner, turn that off, brighten green, we do have to brighten this green up, so I'm obviously doing this all out of order, but if you watch the previous video and you do this quite a bit, this will become second nature. 100, minus 100, 100, 100. There we go, there's all your green bumped up. Fix green spill, take the green, change this to straight to multiplied, solid alpha. This is changed to color, now all the green's gone. Now you will notice that because we had so much green in there, there was a green cast back here, there's a lot of gray showing up in this image, so we're very desaturated, we're very gray here. This might prove an issue, so we might have to do some very strong color correction with this afterwards. This is actually worse than I thought it would be, but let's keep going. Take that green. One of the things people will tell you is that you want to take it from the green that's actually there, go down and over just a bit, and that makes sure to remove any and all green in the background. That way you don't have to mess with these sliders as much. Move it up just a bit, change it to combine matte so it's just black and white, bump this all the way up as high as it can go, because in this case you do want to get rid of as much of this as possible. But you'll notice we still have some slivers in here, which we will have to cover up, so we'll cover that in just a moment. Alright, so this is basically done. The only thing left we have to do is come down to screen shrink and grow. Usually I've been using minus 1.5. That cuts down the edges just enough. And then we blur the screen softness by 2. Just enough. Come back here. Go to Fix Green Spill, choose Set Matte, change it from Alpha Channel to Luminance, and create matte. There you go. There's the image. All fine and dandy. So, what do we do with the rest of this? Well, if we come down here, best to investigate where each of the problem areas are. In this case, this sliver right here is inside his mouth. This fake mustache that's been attached to his face, there is splotches of green in there because these are the strands of hair, so don't want to fix that. There's a black spot right here where there was a reflection on his hat right here, so we do have to take care of that. Over on these guys, there's strong reflections on their helmets all over here. So all of these will have to be addressed in a mask. So let's do that. In the create mask, change this up to fit up to 100%. And what you need to do is don't try to mask this stuff out. Don't try to do anything with this layer here. What you want to do is bring in a new solid, perfectly white, turn it off, and mask out. What you actually need to do is, in case the spots turn up later, or if more of them appear, go to a spot in the timeline where the majority of them are and start there. So mask around them. You don't even have to do curved masks if you don't want to. I may deal with this sliver here separately than these because it'll get too complicated if I deal with that now. So all of these we can cluster together. This one we can do a spot for, and this we don't have to do anything with. So actually there's a little spot right here I would suggest, if you find yourself being anal about it, be anal about it. Get as many of these spots as you can, if not all of them, because somebody may notice one of them. And even if they don't, it still looks good if you take care of them, because that's what modern visual effects artists do. So it's good to be as accurate as you can with this sort of stuff. So down here in all the masks, let's expand all of these. Mask path, that is these dotted lines and the lines between them. So you want to turn on the stopwatch for each of these, and then figure out which one is which. So the first one we made is this one. That's why they all turned into squares, whereas the unselected masks are still circles on their points. So let's scroll in here, slide it over, and scrub through this footage frame by frame, and put in some keyframes and just see how it works. I notice a few more showed up down here. By the way, if a curved masked joint appears like this or vertically like this, all you got to do is go up here to the pen tool, convert vertex tool, and get rid of it. Because we don't need curved ones in this case, but you might need them in other situations. So, as you see, there isn't anything there, so when it does appear, you can have it expand and follow over it, kind of like a slug leeching across the scene here. So every couple of frames you need to watch it, especially if it's large footage. It won't play in real time. It'll kind of convert to this pixelated half, or actually that's probably sixth resolution there. So it'll do that to speed through it as fast as possible, but then you'll lose detail and you won't see where these are. So you have to scrub through every couple of frames to see where things sit. And then you can judge where they are. Yeah, so most of these will be alright for a little while. But once their heads start separating or moving around too much, you'll probably have to move them. And then obviously you do need to go frame by frame after you do the initial work, just to make sure problems don't arise. And you got to watch over the entire image as best as possible to catch all these little things, because once you start making keyframes, every single dot is affected. Even if you just moved one dot and it made a keyframe, it makes a keyframe for every dot. So no matter what you do, make sure that you move every dot where you want it in that one keyframe. Otherwise, as you look at it afterwards, if you notice you missed something and you got to catch it for a whole bunch of keyframes, you will then have to fix it for every keyframe until you get back to where you were. For instance, if I wanted to suddenly get something over here, we move this keyframe up, wham, back where it was in the very next one. So we have to move it up again, bam, back where it was on the next one. So best to, whoa, and you got to watch for phantom keyframes. Get it right on that keyframe there. Best to make sure you get everything you want on that one keyframe and then move ahead. If you miss something, you will have to fix every keyframe in the sequence. And that's not always fun, if it ever is fun. It might also be useful to double check by going back to key light and turning it off where your mask borders need to be, by judging by your eye where that edge actually is and deciding where to fix it. We also have to bring this up, it appears, because we're actually missing some stuff here. Okay, I think we've covered everything in that region except for that little sliver on the back of this helmet here. So one of the things you can also do is press the 0 key on your number pad and have it scroll through every frame until all of these frames are green, and then it'll play through it in real time for you. So now you can watch your mask on every corner here and watch frame by frame to make sure it doesn't go where it's not supposed to go. All in all, I think we're pretty good. Oh, except for that spot. You'll notice we lose it up here, so this actually has to be way over here. Okay. That should have fixed most of that. There we go. Okay, so we need another mask just for this spot right here. That'll be mask number 4. And I'll just speed through this part for you. So I've taken care of that. As you'll notice, it follows the very edge of that helmet there quite well. And then just at the end when his head moves back, right there, or that might actually be his shoulder there, I can't quite tell, but when it comes back, it covers it up, and then a little sliver of black appears here, or gray. That's actually from when it was right here, disappears for a little bit, pops back down there, so actually appears there. Just a little bit of maintenance, and there you go. So I will also take care of this up here, and we'll move on after that's all done. Alright, all of them are done. There might still be some extra bits in there, but most of the time you won't notice anything smaller than this. It really will not show up. Unless, of course, the background is really, really bright and fluorescent, then you may have to do something still. But as it stands now, if you double click, it actually disengages all of those. If we close this up, turn this on, now they're all gone. They match the footage perfectly. So no more black spots. Everything's white, everything's solid, we are good. So, one thing you can also do just to make sure nothing happens, change these to about a 6 on their feather, mask feather. And just in case they come to the edge of anything, there won't be a hard, harsh edge. It'll just blend in. Nothing more than a 6, otherwise you will also still notice it. So that's done. Come back here. Everything should be good now.